Okay, let's get into it. We're doing a deep dive today on something lots of you are probably already thinking about the next iPhones, the iPhone 17 lineup. What are the rumors saying? You sent over quite a pile of sources for us to dig through leaks, analyst predictions, supply chain stuff, even some like really interesting forum discussions. It's a lot. So our job here is to try and, cut through that noise, figure out what the most solid rumors are pointing towards for the iPhone 17, what features maybe got delayed or even canceled, and what about the big design changes or new tech? Think of this as like your shortcut to getting up to speed on these phones way before Apple says anything official.
Yeah, and it's always good to remember, with these kinds of sources, we're looking at whispers, supply chain info, maybe dummy units, analysts' best guesses. It gives us a potential peek at Apple's plans, but nothing's final until they're on stage, right? We're exploring possibilities based on what's out there, these leaks.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. When are we even expecting these phones?
Well, judging by Apple's track record, it's pretty consistent. The strong bet is still for the main announcement in early September. First half, usually.
Okay, September. And the lineup itself, what are the leaks suggesting? Still the usual four models?
Actually, the sources are pointing to a bit of a shakeup. We're expecting, the standard iPhone 17, the 17 Pro, the 17 Pro Max. But the Plus's model, rumor is it's gone, replaced by a new one called the iPhone 17 Air.
iPhone 17 Air. Okay, that's new for the main lineup. I think I saw something in the sources about Apple maybe splitting releases later on.
Yeah, there's a little bit of chatter about that possibly starting in 2026, maybe releasing lower-cost models earlier, Pros later in the year. But for this cycle, the iPhone 17 series, the main four standard Air, Pro, Pro Max, they're all expected together in the fall, like usual. There was some mention of maybe an ease model coming later, but honestly, the main focus of the leaks is definitely that September launch for the Core 4.
Got it. Fall launch for the main group. Okay, so before we jump into what is supposedly coming, let's talk about what's not. Any big rumored features that now seem off the table for the 17?
Yeah, a few things that popped up in earlier rumors seem to be pushed back or maybe even scrapped for this generation, according to the reports. One was that super scratch-resistant display or anti-reflective, something maybe like what Samsung has on the S24 Ultra. That was initially rumored for the 17 Pro models.
Oh, yeah, that sounded like a definite pro feature. Any word on why it's reportedly delayed?
The rumor, reason cited in the sources, is basically production trouble. Apparently, Apple's finding it difficult to make enough of those screens to meet the massive volume they'd need for the Pro phones.
Ah, the classic manufacturing scale problem. Okay. What about solid-state buttons? Feels like we've been hearing about those forever.
You're right, that rumor's been persistent for the 15, the 16. But yeah, sources now seem pretty consistent saying those plans are canceled for the iPhone 17. It's actually kind of unclear from the reports if Apple even still has that on the long-term plan anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably not happening this year.
Okay, no magic buttons then. And the portless iPhone, that always felt like a really bold, maybe controversial move.
Bloomberg did report on that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Plans for a portless design, specifically for this new iPhone 17 Air model, but sources say Apple backed away from it.
Hmm. And the reason?
The specific reason mentioned in the report was worries about attracting attention from the European Union, with the whole USB-C mandate.
Yeah.
Going completely portless right now was apparently seen as potentially asking for more regulatory scrutiny from the EU.
Interesting how regulations can shape design. Okay, and finally, on the what's not happening list, we said the Plus model is out. That's still the consensus.
Yes, the sources pretty much agree on that one. The Plus line seems to be done,
Right.
replaced by this new iPhone 17 Air. And the Air itself sounds like it could be quite different. Rumors point to it being exceptionally thin, maybe a big design shift from the Plus.
Okay, lose the Plus, gain the Air, no super display, no solid-state buttons for the 17, possibly due to production or regulatory concerns. Right. Let's switch gears then. What is rumored? Because some of these design changes sound pretty significant. One that really jumped out from the sources was about the frame material.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most debated points in the discussions you shared. The main rumor is that all the iPhone 17 models, and that includes the Pro and Pro Max, which are currently titanium or stainless steel, might go back to aluminum frame.
All of them back to aluminum. That
Yeah.
feels surprising, especially after Apple made such a big deal about titanium recently, right? The online discussions definitely picked up on that skepticism.
Oh, absolutely. People were really debating it. Aluminum's lighter, yeah, but titanium's stronger for its weight. Maybe allows for a thinner phone that's still stiff. And users were sharing stories like, my aluminum phone dented easily, my Pro didn't. Then there's heat. Titanium isn't great at conducting heat. Aluminum is better.
Right, the thermal aspect and just the feel, that premium feel people talk about. Some definitely prefer the heft or finish of steel or titanium. If they do go back to aluminum, how might Apple spin that?
Well, the speculation in the sources suggests they probably wouldn't, highlight ditching titanium. They'd likely focus on aluminum's positives. Maybe emphasize it being lighter, or perhaps push an environmental angle, since aluminum is very recyclable. One person joked about marketing like introducing Apple alloy or made with 11 recycled cans.
I could see that, but wasn't there a bit of a contradiction in the sources about the Air model's frame?
Yes, and this just shows how messy the rumor mill can be. Despite that all-aluminum river, one specific leak suggested the new iPhone 17 Air might actually use titanium. The reason given was supposedly for strength, because the Air is rumored to be incredibly thin, so yeah, the sources don't quite line up perfectly there for the Air.
Interesting. Okay, frame materials are maybe changing, maybe not for the Air. What about the back of the phone? Another design tweak rumored there.
Yeah, for the standard iPhone 17 and the 17 Pro Max specifically, sources talk about a new kind of glass and metal fusion design. The top part would apparently be aluminum, including a metal camera bump structure, while the bottom half stays glass for wireless charging. Some folks compared it to, like, Google Pixel designs.
A two-tone back? Sounds different. And the camera bump itself, big changes rumored there, especially for the Pro and the new Air models.
That's right. This sounds like a major visual shift. Rumors and alleged dummy units point away from the square or vertical camera setup towards a horizontal bar, stretching across the back. On the Pro models, the lenses would still be on the left side of this bar, but things like the flash, LiDAR, the microphone, they'd move over to the right side within the bar. The new Air is also expected to get a horizontal bar, but shallower apparently, and housing just a single camera lens. But the standard iPhone 17, it's expected to keep the current vertical, non-bar design.
So that bar becomes a clear visual marker for the Air and the Pros. Some of the discussion online mentioned Apple might be due for a bigger industrial design refresh overall. Do these changes fit that idea?
Some people were definitely saying that, pointing to Apple's history, often changing the core design every 5 years or so. They felt these kinds of shifts. The camera bar, maybe the materials, the different back designs, could signal that it's time for one of those bigger refreshes.
Makes sense. Okay, moving from the outside to the screen itself, any size changes rumored?
Yes, a couple of tweaks expected there. The standard iPhone 17 might jump up to 6.3 inches, which would actually match the rumored size for the 17 Pro. The 17 Pro Max is thought to stay at that large 6.9-inch size, and the new 17 Air, rumored to be 6.6 inches, kind of slotting in between the standard Pro and the Pro Max.
A bigger base model screen, interesting. What about promotion? That smooth 120 hertz refresh rate that's currently just on the Pro models.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. If the rumors are true, sources are suggesting a pretty major democratization of that feature. The word is that all 4 iPhone 17 models, Standard, Air, Pro, and Pro Max, might get promotion, likely using LTPO panels that let the refresh rate change. So, smoother scrolling, smoother animations, maybe even better battery life from that variable refresh across the whole lineup.
Wow. Promotion on the regular iPhone and the Air, that takes away a huge selling point for the Pro models, doesn't it? Smooth screens for everybody, potentially. Now, what about that anti-reflective display we talked about earlier? Still off the table for 17.
Yeah, as we mentioned, despite those early whispers, the current info suggests that's delayed for this generation, at least for the 17 Pro models.
Okay. And the dynamic island, that little pill cutout thing, is it changing?
Well, this is a classic case of conflicting rumors. We've got one analyst suggesting new Medellins tech for a sensor could shrink the Face ID parts, leading to a potentially smaller dynamic island on all the 17s. But then another major analyst says, nope, it'll be largely unchanged from the iPhone 16. So
yeah,
who knows? We'll have to wait and see on that one.
The rumor mill in action. All right, let's talk cameras. We touched on the physical look, the bar. But what about the actual tech inside? Lenses, features.
Okay, a big upgrade rumored across the board, all 4 models, is the front camera. Expected to jump from 12 megapixels up to 24 megapixels. Standard, Air, Pro, Pro Max.
Better selfies and video calls for everyone. Nice. And the rear cameras, especially on the Pros.
For the 17 Pro and Pro Max, yeah, a pretty big pixel jump is rumored. Sources suggest all 3 rear cameras, the main one, the ultra-wide, and the telephoto could be 48 megapixels. That's a first. And the telephoto is specifically rumored to be a new 48MP tetraprism lens, keeping the 5x optical zoom we saw introduced before. That fancy telephoto lens is expected to stay exclusive to the Pro models, though.
48 megapixels on all three main rear cameras. That sounds like a huge boost for detail, cropping potential. What about the camera on the new iPhone 17 Air, though?
Right, this is where that super thin design might come with a trade-off.
Hmm.
Because it's rumored to be so thin, maybe like 5.5 millimeter,
Hmm.
sources suggest the Air will only have a single rear camera, a 48 MP one, but just the one.
Only one rear camera. What does that mean practically?
Well, the sources point out a key consequence.
Hmm.
With just one lens, the iPhone 17 Air probably won't be able to capture spatial video or photos, 3D stuff for the Vision Pro. Not unless Apple figures out some new software trick to do it with a single camera. It seems unlikely based on current tech.
Got it. So the Air might sacrifice camera versatility for that thinness. And the standard iPhone 17, what's its camera setup looking like?
The standard 17 is expected to stick with two rear cameras, probably that 48 MP main sensor and a 12 MP ultra-wide. And as we mentioned, it's expected to keep the traditional vertical layout, no horizontal bar.
Okay. Any other cool camera tech rumored for the pros? Software stuff, maybe hardware?
Yeah, a few whispers. Potential for 8K video recording finally coming to the pros, up from 4K. Support for dual video recording, like recording from the front and back cameras at the same time. And the really intriguing one, those sources are a bit split on whether it's for the 17 Pro or maybe pushed to the 18 Pro, is a variable aperture lens for the main camera.
Variable aperture. For people less familiar, what does that actually let you do?
It's something you find on like proper cameras, DSLRs and mirrorless. It gives you direct control over how much light hits the sensor and, crucially, the depth of field, how blurry the background is. It would mean more manual control, more creative options for focus and blur, much closer to a dedicated camera. That would be a first for Apple on an iPhone.
That sounds like a pretty serious step up for phone photography, really blurring those lines. Okay, let's shift inside the phone. Performance, power, connectivity, any big internal upgrades expected?
Yeah, one key upgrade seems likely across all four models. More RAM. Sources are pointing to 12 GBs of RAM for every iPhone 17, up from 8 GB in the 16 lineup. This is probably to help power new features, maybe especially any big advancements in Apple Intelligence or on-device AI stuff.
More RAM is always good, yeah, especially for AI. What about the main chip, the processor? Will they all get the same new A19?
Well, the rumors here are a bit messy, actually. Shows how tricky predicting Apple's exact chip strategy can be. Early rumors did suggest maybe A19 for all models, but more recent reports, especially from analyst Jeff Pu, suggest a tiered approach again. Like, the Pro models get an A19 Pro chip, probably on better 3-nanometer process for more efficiency and power. The Air gets the regular A19, and surprisingly, the standard iPhone 17 might get the A18 chip, the same one expected in this year's iPhone 16s.
Holding the A18 over for the base 17, that feels like going back to an older strategy.
It definitely would be, yeah, a return to a pattern from a few years ago. And, some sources did express a bit of skepticism about that specific part of the rumor.
Gotcha. Okay, if the chips are getting more powerful, any talk about better cooling to handle the heat?
Yes, there are rumors about improved thermal management, potentially using vapor chamber cooling tech. This is mainly rumored for the Pro models, to sustain performance during heavy tasks like gaming or video editing. But again, there's a conflicting whisper that maybe this improved cooling could come to all the 17 models. So, another point of uncertainty.
Better cooling would be welcome. What about battery life? Always a huge factor.
Sources mention potentially larger batteries. The 17 Pro Max is specifically rumored to maybe go over 5,000 milliamp, and there's talk of using silicon carbon anode battery tech across the line. That's expected to give better energy density, so maybe better overall battery life, even if the battery size isn't dramatically bigger. Oh, and a small detail, but nice for users. Easier to remove battery adhesive could make battery swaps simpler down the line.
That is a nice touch for repairability. Okay, charging speeds. Are we finally getting faster wired charging?
Doesn't look like it. Sources suggest wired charging will probably stay capped at the current 35W maximum. There is mention of potential support for the newer Key 2.2 wireless standard, which can theoretically handle up to 50W, but the sources are careful that doesn't guarantee the phones themselves will actually charge that fast wirelessly.
Still waiting on faster wired speeds then. Connectivity, Wi-Fi, cellular.
All 4 iPhone 17 models are expected to get Apple's first custom-designed Wi-Fi chip, and it should support the latest standard, Wi-Fi 7. Much faster speeds, better in crowded areas.
Custom Wi-Fi chip, interesting. And the SIM tray, Apple ditched the physical slot in the US, expanding that.
Yeah, the expectation is that Apple will remove the physical SIM slot in more countries next year.
Yeah.
And the iPhone 17 Air specifically because it's rumored to be so thin, is also tipped to lack a physical SIM tray, continues that trend towards fewer ports and slots.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of potential changes, design, new models, internals, features, which brings us inevitably to the price. What are the sources saying about how much these might cost?
Yeah, the report's pretty blunt here. Sources indicate Apple is planning to raise iPhone prices this year.
Just across the board, regardless of market conditions.
That's what the sources suggest, yeah. They offer some context, pointing out that the base price for the iPhone Pro in the US hasn't actually gone up since the iPhone X hit $999 back in 2017. So the argument presented in the sources is that, based on history and the rumored upgrades, a price hike for the Pro line is kind of overdue.
Overdue. Interesting framing. The sources also talked about tariffs potentially playing a role. What did they report there?
Right, the source material brings up the possibility of tariffs influencing prices, specifically mentioning potential threats from President Trump, like a hypothetical 25% tariff on phones made outside the US, comparing places like India versus China. Sources reported that Apple might try to frame any price increases around the cost of new features and designs, rather than directly blaming potential tariffs, maybe to avoid political blowback. But they also stressed the tariff situation is really uncertain and could definitely still impact the final pricing.
Okay, so just reporting what the sources discussed about tariffs, how might that theoretical 25% impact the price based on their examples?
Yeah, based only on what the source material hypothesized about that 25% tariff threat. They gave examples like if the iPhone 17 Pro is rumored at $999 base, that tariff could push it towards, say, $229 hypothetically. The rumored base prices we saw mentioned before any potential tariff impact were $799 for the standard 17, $899 for the new 17 Air, which is actually the current plus price, interestingly, then $999 for the 17 Pro, and $1,199 for the 17 Pro Max. But again, the sources really emphasize the tariff part is volatile, and Apple might focus on feature costs anyway when justifying prices.
Got it. So higher prices seem likely, according to the sources, potentially pushed even higher by external factors. That's definitely a lot to digest for the iPhone 17. Before we wrap this deep dive, did the sources offer any quick hints about even further out, like iPhone 18 or beyond?
Yeah, they touched on a few things, kind of giving context for Apple's longer game. Rumors like under-display Face ID eventually. That would let the dynamic island shrink more, or even disappear for a true all-screen phone. Continued talk about a foldable iPhone sometime down the road, that variable aperture camera. While some hope for 17 Pro, others think maybe it's more likely for the 18 Pro, showing how these things shift. And even mentions of Apple potentially aiming for, like, a 200-megapixel camera someday, really pushing the resolution.
Under-display tech, foldables, monster cameras. Definitely sounds like Apple has ambitious plans cooking for the future. But bringing it back to the iPhone 17, that was a pretty comprehensive look at the rumors.
It really was. I think if we synthesize the key things from all these sources, the lineup itself is changing with that new Air model. We're seeing signs of a potentially significant industrial design refresh. Exactly. And having this kind of overview pieced together from the credible rumors just helps you, the listener, get a sense of the potential direction, whether you're just following Apple tech or actually thinking about upgrading next year.
So here's something for you to chew on. Given that rumored shift back to aluminum for the Pro phones and all the debate we saw in the sources about materials, how much does that premium feel actually matter to you? Is it all about the tech inside and how durable it is day to day? And maybe more importantly, how much does a potential price increase change what you expect an iPhone to deliver? Something to think about as we wait for that likely September announcement. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the iPhone 17 rumors. Keep digging for info, keep forming your own perspectives, and we'll catch you on the next one.